Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going over the first day of Bloomburrow spoilers, all the new combos and synergies that I could think of today that you're going to see in your upcoming standard, and also older formats as well. But let's jump into the previews here with a new land, a legendary land, 3 Tree City, a legendary land that enters and you choose a creature type. You can tap it to add colorless, 2 to tap to choose a color, add an amount of mana of that color equal to the number of creatures you control of the chosen type. So obviously anything that creates a bunch of tokens, such as Gleeful Demolition of a certain creature type, would be pretty good. There's this new card called Hop to It, which is a 3 mana sorcery that creates 3/1/1 white rabbit creature tokens. So in standard, rabbits might be the best home for this. We'll see. Really kind of depends on the tribes. We'll have to see how all the kind of tribes flesh out in Bloomburrow, but in older formats, maybe elves, and also Land Elves is coming to standard in the near future. So elves might be a great home for this. I think this has potential to see play in a bunch of different decks. Any land that can tap for more than 1 mana is definitely pretty powerful. And then if you had ways to untap it with certain creatures that can untap lands, it can get kind of out of control. We know this from Nykthos. So I think this card has some pretty good potential for standard, for older formats as well. Yeah, you kind of have to go all in on a tribe, but I don't think that's too big of a deck restriction, and certainly has potential for a lot of mana generation. So that is the legendary land. And next up, we've got all our kind of rabbit cards here because they all kind of synergize with each other. So the Phineas Ace Archer is a 2-mana 2/2, Vigilance Reach, which is a rabbit. And when it attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. That's a token or a rabbit. So this could work in token strategies just in general, but it also works just with any rabbit as well. And then if you control, if your creatures have power 10 or greater, draw a card. So a really good value card and just pumping your whole team. Really wants you to go wide. So again, the hop to it is really nice with this. I mean, if you play this on 2 and a hop to it on 3, you attack, you put a +1/+1 counter on all of those tokens, then that's 6, 8. So you just need 2 more power to draw a card right away. So if you had a 1-drop that was a rabbit, that would probably get you all the way there on turn 3 to draw the card. So a lot of potential, really strong value with Phineas. I think that's definitely going to be at the forefront of a rabbit deck if those are decent. We also have the Valley Quest Caller, which is a 2-mana 2/3, which would pump all rabbits, but also kind of works with the bats, the birds, the mice as well. So definitely a pretty solid lord. Going to kind of keep track of the different creature types because that could matter quite a bit. So all of the bats and birds and mice that we see could synergize with the Valley Quest Caller, but I think it's pretty good, especially in the rabbit deck because the rabbits kind of want to go wide, and so having an anthem effect for all your rabbits is pretty powerful here. We have the Warren Warcaller, which is a 4-mana 4/4. Now, Offspring is a new ability that says you can pay an additional 2 in this case, and it comes into play as a 1/1 copy of this card. So if you had 6 mana, you could make basically two of these. One of them would be a 1/1 and a token. But it says when you attack, you choose one, create a 1/1 white rabbit creature token that's tapped and attacking, and attacking creatures you control get +1/+1 until end turn. So again, the rabbit strategy seems like it's just trying to go really wide and pump up your whole team, which seems pretty powerful. So we'll, going to see what other kind of rabbit cards we get in the set and evaluate from there. But a lot of potential good synergy within the rabbit tribe here. Next up, we've got Mew the Trash Technician, which is a 3-mana 2/4, which is Raccoon Warrior. So this is kind of the raccoon legend here at the beginning of your first main phase. Add red or green for each raccoon you control. So raccoons are red-green. And whenever you expend 4, you gain 3 life. So expend means it's whenever you pay that much mana, you spend that much mana total, then you get that effect. So if you cast a 4-drop on the next turn, then you'd get the 4 life. And then it says when you expend 8, exile the top 2 cards of your library until end of turn. You can play those cards. So if you spent 8 mana to cast spells, then you get that sort of impulse draw. So I think this card is pretty powerful. Actually, it will kind of really depend on the raccoons we get. Obviously, the first line of text is the most powerful thing. To be able to a 3-mana card that can add 2 mana, potentially 3 mana, 4 mana each turn is pretty powerful. So we already have Bramble Familiar, which is a raccoon in standard, and then there's this new one, Wandertail Mentor, which can tap to add a red or green, which is another ramp card. So it looks like kind of raccoons could have sort of this ramp theme, which would be pretty good. It also has an expend ability. So it looks like they're trying to get a bunch of mana, spend a bunch of mana, and get payoffs for that mana. Bramble Familiar is pretty nice too because it's got Fetch Quest if you draw it late, or you can also use its ability to return it to your hand. If you have a bunch of extra mana around, you can use the Fetch Quest to sort of get something bigger from your deck perhaps into play. So I'm liking this sort of red-green ramp strategy with the raccoons. It looks like where might be kind of at the forefront of that strategy. Okay, next up we've got Osteomancer Adept, which is a 2-mana 2/2 with Death Touch, a Squirrel Warlock, or a Squirrelock, as I'd like to call it. Um, until end of turn, you can cast creature spells from your graveyard by foraging in addition to paying their other costs. If you cast a spell this way, that creature enters with a finality counter. So to forage, you exile 3 cards from your graveyard, or you sacrifice a food. And then the finality counter means if it dies, you exile it. So this could work really well with creatures that come into play that make foods, or creatures that come into play and mill cards, because what you could do is a kind of sort of like mill if you have a self mill deck, um, for example with Aftermath Analyst, then you're kind of filling up your graveyard, right? So then you have more creatures in your graveyard that you could use with this ability, and then if you're casting the creatures from the graveyard and they come into play, it's refilling your graveyard as well to be able to cast more creatures from the graveyard again, to forage basically. Or if the creatures created a food token, you could use the sacrifice the food token. But it works particularly well with self-mill strategy because the self-mill kind of perpetuates the ability more by giving you more cards in the graveyard to cast. So I think this card's pretty powerful. I mean, it's kind of like a must-kill. It can get you a ton of card advantage if you don't answer it. So it's got some potential, I think. And having Death Touch is definitely relevant on a 2/2 to trade with something bigger later in the game. So yeah, pretty solid card. I'm excited to build around this one. Next up, we've got Alina the Divergent Storm, which is a 5-mana 3/5 Otter Wizard, and it says whenever you cast a spell, if it's the first instant or sorcery, yes, if it's the first instant spell, the first sorcery spell, or the first Otter spell, other than Alina, you've cast this turn, you may target opponent draw a card. If you do, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. Got through it. Okay, so much text on these cards. Notably, it's an otter and a wizard. I thought this, you can see what other otters we have. The elusive otter, so you can make copies of the elusive otter, or you can make copies of the adventure side of it, which would be pretty nice to copy as well. I also thought maybe it'd be decent in a mill deck with Archive Trap. If you played this down, because its ability makes the opponent draw cards, so that actually could be an advantage to you if you're playing a mill deck. You want your opponents to be drawing more cards. So maybe there's something there. It kind of seems like maybe a commander card, not really super pushed for standard, but I guess we'll kind of have to see, because making a copy of an otter could be pretty powerful, and obviously we'll see what other kind of sorceries and instants we have. Anything that grants you an extra turn. Time Warp is a pretty good thing to copy. But if we have some other like really powerful otters that you really want to copy, then that could potentially be pretty good. So we'll see on this one. Okay, next up we've got Glarb, Calamity, Augur, which is a 3-mana 2/4 with Death Touch, a Frog, Wizard, Noble. I think this is one of the best cards previewed so far. It's got a lot of potential, I think, for many different formats. And it says you can look at the top card of your library anytime, and you can play lands that cast spells with mana value 4 or greater from the top of your library. And you can tap it to Surveil too. So as it is, a 3-mana 2/4 Death Touch is okay. But being able to play lands off the top of your deck, pretty powerful effect. Being able to play also spells, any spells that cost 4 or greater from the top of your library, that's a lot of card advantage, and you get like some selection from the top of your library by surveilling, or just kind of like filling up your graveyard. So in standard, I was thinking, yeah, maybe this would go in like it's like a graveyard self-mill sort of strategy with like the Urborg Glorgoyf, perhaps, just to keep filling up your graveyard every turn. But in older formats, I think this is might be really powerful. I don't know if you'd fit this, how you'd cast this in Affinity, but if you could, like all of your Frogmites or your Mew Enforcers, or there's a ton of different Mew Enforcer variants now that you could just play off the top of your deck for free. You could play Treasure Cruise. I really like this with Delve cards because its Surveil works to fill up your graveyard as it is, and then you could cast Delve cards off the top of your deck because their mana cost is greater than 4 typically. I think it works with the pitch elementals too, like Grief. I think it works with Force of Will. You can cast it off the top of your deck. Tell me if I'm wrong about that. I'm not sure exactly, but I think in older formats and Legacy, this could be pretty powerful even, potentially. So yeah, I don't know. I think this card is really strong, and it's also a frog. So that definitely can synergize with other things in this set as well. But yeah, let me know what you think about in the comments. Anything I missed with this guy, but Glarb, I think, probably one of the best cards previewed today. Okay, next up we've got Castro, the Wind Crescent. I'm sorry if I pronounce these all wrong. I probably am. So, legendary creature, bird, scout. It's a 4/5 with flying. Whenever one or more birds you control do combat damage to a player, you choose one. You can put a bird card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield. So you can kind of bring back any birds that might have died if you want, which is cool. But you can also put a +1/+1 on each bird you control or draw a card. So a lot of good options here. We have some decent birds in standard, not like the best, but I'm sure we'll probably get some more good ones in this set. But we already have Even Interrupter, which is a pretty decent one, just to kind of delay your opponent. I thought Thrumming Bird would be kind of sweet as a combo with this because of the +1/+1 counter on each bird. So if you hit them, you could stack it so that the +1/+1 counters gets on each bird, and then you proliferate and you double or you add an extra counter to each of the birds. And notably, it says so you can kind of play this and then get its ability right away. So this doesn't have to attack to have its ability work. So I think it could be the top end of sort of a bird deck, a bird strategy. We'll kind of see how the bird tribe flushes out again in this set. But those are some ideas right now. Okay, next up we've got the Maha. It's Feathers Knight, which is a 5-mana 6/5 with it's an elemental and a bird, and it's got Flample, the flying trample, and Ward, discard a card. So having some Ward is kind of nice on this. Creatures your opponents control have base toughness 1. So it can definitely work with kind of Knights of Soul Betrayal combos, anything that gives your opponent's creatures all -1/-1. That's particularly good in older formats because if you have that out, you play this right away, state base effects, check, and it will destroy all your opponent's creatures. In standard, there's some cards that give your opponents all -1/-1. The cheapest one I could find was Tectonic Hazard, which has 1 damage. So if you played this and played Tectonic Hazard, maybe on the same turn, you could just wipe your opponent's board, which would be pretty sweet. Yeah, I think this card's pretty strong, actually. It's a little bit of protection and definitely some ways to kind of really blow out your opponent with its last ability. So we'll see what happens, see what other kind of effects we get that reduce your opponent's creatures. If we get like another Knights of Soul Betrayal effect in standard, then this definitely will go up in value for sure. Okay, we got Yagra, Eater of All, the 5-mana 6/6 with Ward, sacrifice a food. So it's pretty hard to target this guy unless your opponent is playing a food deck. And it says other creatures are food artifacts in addition to their other types and have 2 sack this permanent, gain 2 life. So it turns all your creatures into food when there's some infinite combos. And also says whenever a food is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So if you have this other new card out, Camellia, which is a 3-mana 3/3, a Squirrel Squirlock, as I like to say, with Menace. Other squirrels have Menace, and whenever you sacrifice one or more foods, you create a 1/1 green squirrel creature token. It also has Forage for 2 to put a +1/+1 counter on each other squirrel you control. So that guy would be on its own pretty good in a squirrel deck for sure, because definitely synergizes with what the squirrels are trying to do. But it also has an infinite combo with your Gra, because if you sacrifice, you need a sacrifice outlet for this to work. But if you sacrifice, if you have another creature, you sacrifice that. Uh, because it is a food, it will count as triggering Camilla's ability, and then you'll make a 1/1 green squirrel. You can sacrifice that, but that counts as a food, and so you'll trigger its ability again. You sacrifice that, but that counts as a food. It'll make another squirrel, and you just can keep going, basically infinite. Whatever sacrifice abilities. In standard, we have Bart, which is decent, and then it would also trigger the Yagra to make the Yagra itself infinitely big as well, to put +1/+1 counters on it. So some infinite combo potential there. In older formats with Cauldron Familiar, and Explorer, Pioneer, you can use your Gra with 2 Cauldron Familiars. If you have one in your graveyard, you can sacrifice the other one to bring the Cauldron Familiar back, which will then trigger its ability, and put the other Cauldron Familiar in the graveyard, and then use that to loop the Cauldron Familiar back, and just keep sacrificing each other and for an infinite amount of life loss. So that could be a thing. 5 mana is kind of a lot for Pioneer, but that could be a nice combo. 3-card combo, infinite damage. But yeah, we'll see. This card seems pretty strong. I mean, just a 5 mana 6/6 with pretty difficult to target, unless your opponent is also playing a food deck, and definitely some upside. So cool card. Let's see. Next up, we got Ral, the Crackling Wit. So the first Planeswalker we're seeing, which is a 4 mana for loyalty. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a loyalty counter on it. And +1 to create a blue and red otter creature token with prowess. -3, draw 3 cards, discard 2. And then it's ultimate -10, draw 3, get an emblem. With instant sorcery spells you cast, have Storm. So ultimate is pretty powerful. If you can get to that, and maybe in some Storm deck in the older formats you could. I'm trying to think of what kind of home and standard this would see. Maybe there's some sort of prowess deck that would want this. With Swift Spear, and of course we've got the elusive otter as well. It creates otter tokens, which is of note. So this could support the otter tribe if that matters a lot for how many otters you have in play, or something that buffs all otters. So something to keep note of with this card. It's -3 is kind of weak, but I don't know. Maybe it's pretty good, because if you keep casting stuff, then you can get its loyalty back and keep using it every turn, which would be pretty strong. But I think mostly you're going to try to just make a bunch of tokens with this, and it itself will trigger prowess on other creatures by when you cast it, because it is a non-creature spell itself. So yeah, can definitely get up to a lot of loyalty. It definitely threatens the ultimate pretty quickly too, which is nice. So yeah, I think this card's got some potential. We'll see what happens with otters and prowess stuff. Yeah, we'll see. Okay, next up we've got Season of Weaving, which is a 6 mana sorcery. It says choose up to 5 paws worth of mode, so that's kind of like this little currency. You may choose the same mode more than once. So you can basically spend 5 paws as you're casting this. So you could draw 5 cards, for example, or for 2 paws you can choose an artifact or creature you control, create a token that's a copy of it, and then 3 paws return each non-land, non-token permanent to its owner's hand. The main card I thought would be a nice combo with this would be Simulacrum Synthesizer, because, well, I mean, drawing cards is always good, but if you wanted to create 2 copies of the synthesizer, you could, which would then trigger each other copy more times. You'd make a bunch of constructs, so you could do that mode to copy the synthesizer twice. I believe you can copy the same thing twice. But also the last mode, which is return each non-land, non-token permanent to its owner's hand. Notice it says non-token permanent, so the tokens that the Simulacrum Synthesizer creates would not get returned, but it might bounce your opponent's entire board, and then your construct tokens could get in for the win. So this could be pretty nice in any kind of token deck, because it does not bounce your tokens, and it bounces all your opponent's stuff. But yeah, maybe there's some other uses I'm not thinking of for this. It is a bit expensive for sure, but definitely powerful card. Just 6 mana draw 5 at the worst if you have nothing to copy, or they don't have anything to bounce. But yeah, let me know what you think about this one in the comments for sure. All right, next up we've got Artist Talent. So we've got class cards coming back. And so right away it's a 2 mana enchantment, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Uh, level 2 is non-creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and then level 3, 3 more mana. If a source you control will deal non-combat damage to an opponent or permanent, it deals that much damage plus 2 instead. So it's pretty. I feel like this card is pretty expensive to kind of do stuff. Um, so it's kind of 5 mana initially to get to the level 2, and then 8 mana total to get to level 3. Not sure if that's quite worth it. So I was thinking of like, if you could just play it on 2 and then get a bunch of value off of that. Like, what kind of home would that want to be? And maybe like like Phoenix decks would want this, maybe, because they really want to kind of churn through their deck. They have a ton of non-creature spells. They want to have discount outlets for the like Phoenix as well. And then if they have extra mana lying around, um, you know, being able to make everything cheaper would be useful. Storm decks, maybe if there is some sort of storm deck in standard, this could see some play there. Again, it is a little expensive, but yeah, let me know in the comments what you think about this one. That was kind of the best I can think of. Maybe like a Reanimator deck if you really wanted to, get cards in your graveyard, fill up your graveyard with the first ability. That could be useful as well. But yeah. Next up, we've got the Thundertrap Trainer, which is a 2 mana 1/2 with Offspring 4. So again, you can pay additional 4, copy it, and when it enters, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You can reveal a non-creature, non-land card from among them, put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this is a nice. I think this is just kind of a nice like tutor-ish effect. It reminds me a lot of Philology Archaeologist, which kind of does very similar things. Doesn't fill up the graveyard, but it does get you 1 card deeper, and also has the Offspring ability. It's also an Otter and a Wizard, which both are relevant card types. It's another card for kind of Flare of Denial in older formats to sacrifice to. We could find the Flare of Denial and then use it to sacrifice it. And then late game Offspring, getting 2 of these is pretty powerful too. You couldn't sacrifice the token though to Flare of Denial because it has to be a non-token blue creature. But yeah, we'll see. I think I have to see more about what the Otters are up to. I mean, the Otters seem like they are spell slingers, so this could be good in just finding more spells. It can also find artifacts as well, which could be useful, or disenchantments. If you're kind of looking for some sort of tutor for that in your deck, this can be one way of helping you be more consistent in finding that. So yeah. Next up, we've got the Valley Rot Collar, which is a 2 mana 1/3, a Squirrel Lock, and it's got Menace. And whenever it attacks, each opponent loses X life. You gain X life, where X is the number of other squirrels, bats, lizards, and rats you control. So a decent card, I think, could be there's sort of this like squirrel, bats, lizards, rats in black. And Lord Skitter is particularly nice because that makes a rat token every turn. Again, we'll kind of have to see what other uh, cards we get, but anything that kind of makes more tokens of itself would be pretty good synergy. Like if you played this on 2 and you played Lord Skinner on 3, and it makes a rat token before you attack, and then you attack, drain for 2 right away. It's got Menace, so it's hard to block, which is nice. So if you did that, and then the next turn you get another rat, play more rats, like this thing could certainly snowball out of control if they don't have removal for it with Lord Skitter or other kind of cards that work well. Just any sort of Deep Cavern Bat would be pretty nice with this as well. But rats have a lot of kind of tokens already, and we'll see. Yeah, we'll see what happens with the squirrels as well, because squirrels itself, like if you have 2 of these, they'll see each other, which is kind of nice as well. So yeah, I think this card's got a lot of potential to be pretty strong aggro card. All right, next up we've got Season of the Bold, which is a 5 mana sorcery. Choose up to 5 paws. Again, so this is kind of the same as the other card we spoke of earlier. You can choose the same mode more than once. So 1 paw to create a tap treasure token. 2 paws, exile top 2 cards of your library until the end of your next turn. You can play them. And 3 paws until the end of your next turn. Whenever you cast a spell, it does 2 damage to up to 1 target creature. I was hoping it would say creature or opponent, because then this would be kind of cool to just like storm off and kill your opponent the next turn. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like this card is not very good overall. It can ramp you quite a bit. Like if creating 5 treasure tokens will get you from, get you up to 10 mana, and you can cast Eldrazi and stuff the next turn. So there is that. This certainly can ramp you pretty hard, but you really have to do nothing on this turn, because they come into play tapped, and then you can exile top 2 cards to your library. But then it's all just kind of like set up for the next turn, which isn't necessarily bad, but it's kind of, you have to take turn 5 off and spend 5 mana to do nothing. So I don't know. The only card I can think of that worked kind of pretty well with this is Magda, which is the 2-mana 2/2 Magda. That you can sacrifice the 3 treasures right away. So let's say you had um, a treasure already out, and then you cast this. That would give you 6 treasures, so it would give you 2 red Scorpion Dragon tokens with flying and haste right away. So that would be pretty decent. I would say 5 mana for 2 4/4 flying hasters would definitely be worth it. So that would be sort of a pretty good payoff that you could kind of get immediate value from this thing. But yeah, let me know what you think about this one again in the comments below. All right, and then the third season we got was the Season of Loss, which is a 5 mana. Again, the same kind of paw mode stuff. You can pay 1 paw to have each player sacrifice a creature, 2 paws to draw a card for each creature you control that died this turn, and then 3 paws, each opponent loses X life, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. So the kind of last ability, I think, is maybe the strongest and most useful. It could kind of be a 5 mana wipe the board. You could go everything is sacrifice 5 creatures. It could be kind of nice with the veto to trigger Veto's ability. If you had 3 other creatures out, you could get all of Veto's abilities. That's kind of the best I could think of with kind of how to use that first mode. But I think the last mode, if you just had a self-mill deck with a bunch of creatures, and for example, the Archaeologist would fill your deck and maybe help you find the Season of Lost, and then you go 5 mana, each player sacrifices 2 creatures, and then each opponent loses X life. If you had a bunch of creatures in your graveyard, that could kind of maybe be like 5 mana, 10 damage or more to your opponent, potentially. So that's sort of my ideas with this one. Okay, we got Bea the Bounding Spring, which is a 4 mana 4/5. Legendary creature Elemental Elk. When it enters, create a treasure token. If an opponent controls more lands than you, you gain 4 life. An opponent has more life. Create 2 blue fish creature tokens. If an opponent controls more creatures than you, and you draw a card if an opponent has more cards in hand than you. So this card is just really good against sort of aggro decks, which, if your opponent comes out of the gate and hits you, plays a bunch of creatures, hits you, you can sort of gain 4 life and create 2 blue creature tokens, and you have a 4 mana 4/5. That's pretty good. It's okay if the opponent is up on cards too, because it'll catch you up and draw cards. So it just kind of catches you up no matter what you're doing. If they're ahead on lands, you can get a treasure. The thing about this card, though, and what I want to watch as we go through this set review is, as more cards get revealed, is the gift cards. So I haven't talked too much about the gift cards, but for example, Wear Down, which can have your opponent draw cards, so that can make them be up on cards. There's a gift card that like gives them a fish token, I think. So you can give them more creatures than you, give them more cards than you. Maybe you can gift your life to your opponent. I'm not really sure. We'll see what kind of gifts they have, but this could kind of work. Maybe you can gift your lands to your opponent. I don't know. We'll kind of see what other kind of gift cards we get, and so this could be kind of a combo with that in terms of your letting your opponent have all these resources, but then you're getting them back with Bea as well. So we'll see. I think this card is pretty strong, even regardless, just kind of like as a sideboard card against certain strategies. But yeah, let's move on to the Dream Mew Entrancer, which is a 4 mana 3/4 frog wizard with reach. When it enters the battlefield, tap up to 1 target creature and put 3 stun counters on it. If you control that creature, draw 2 cards. So this card's a pretty powerful enters the battlefield effect. So there's this other frog dude, this Lily Splash Mentor frog druid. has this ability to exile 3 mana to exile another creature you control and return to the battlefield with +1/+1 counter on it. So being able to blink this guy, I think, is pretty strong. Note that if you play him, you can target himself. You could target, maybe you have just like a token you control and put a stun counter on it, or 3 stun counters on it to draw 2 cards. But kind of be able to continually use this ability, such as with the Lily Splash Mentor, is pretty strong. Being able to kind of stun all your opponent's creatures or just draw a bunch of cards yourself. There's other ways I think frogs have to blink or bounce your own creatures, so kind of be able to bounce this guy back. So, or just bounce the creature that you targeted that put the stun counters on it, or blink that creature and have it come back into play. There's some synergy there, I think. So yeah, we'll see with this guy. And then the other frog stuff, we got Clement the Worrywart, which is a 3 mana 3/3 vigilance frog druid. And whenever it or another creature you control enters, return up to one target creature you control with lesser mana value to its owner's hand. So again, kind of a bounce thing. And then frogs you control have tap to add a mana, which is a pretty powerful effect. So this other frog, we have the 2 mana Pond Prophet, which when it comes into play, you draw a card, which is kind of nice. But also would be, if you had that on 2 and you played this on 3, you could then bounce it. I think you could just like float a mana with the ability on the stack and then bounce it back to your hand and then play it again to draw another card. If you had a 1 mana frog or anything you wanted to bounce at 1 mana, then you could bounce that. So this guy's got some kind of combo value potential for sure, and be able to make all your frogs tap for mana is pretty powerful as well. So again, we'll kind of have to see how all the frogs kind of play out and what other kind of frogs we have to really know how good these cards are. But I like this guy quite a bit. Okay, next up we've got Kidnap, which is a 4-mana enchantment aura. So this is another gift card. You can have your opponent draw a card, and when it enters, you tap the creature. If the gift wasn't promised, you put 3 stun counters on it, and you control the creature. So kind of a control magic variant. If you don't want it to have stun counters on it, you have to give them a card. I thought that would be kind of nice though. Like if you have Sheldred out, then having your opponent or making your opponent draw a card can be an advantage for you. So that's kind of a neat synergy there. And then this is also just an aura. You can search it up with Kellen, for example. So I think this is a pretty strong card, being able to steal your opponent's creatures, and then forcing them to draw a card. So perhaps can see some play either in an aura deck or some blue-black deck. Not sure. We'll see. All right, next up we've got the Thorn Vault Forger, which is a 2 mana 2/2 Squirrel Ranger. So again, a mana dork. You could tap it to add uh, a green, but you could also tap it to forage and add 2 mana of any combination of colors. So anything that kind of fills up your graveyard would be pretty good with this. His last ability too is 4 mana tap to search your library for a squirrel card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So obviously goes into any sort of squirrel synergy deck or any other squirrels that you would want to search out. You could search out more copies of itself. So a nice little mana sink as well. But any card that costs 2 that can tap for 2 mana is pretty strong. And so you could even do like with a Gumdrop Poisoner, you could create a food token on 1, play this on 2, then turn 3 you could tap it right away to sack the food and have 5 mana on turn 3, which would be pretty strong. It also kind of is nice with like things that want you to sacrifice food, forage, because this guy is like a 0 mana. Usually you have to pay 2 mana to sacrifice the food, but this you just tap to sacrifice the food. And so with the experimental confectioner, its last ability, well, it gives you a food, and then its last ability is whenever you sacrifice a food, you create a rat token. So those are kind of a nice synergy combination. So yeah, this I think could work really well in sort of a food deck, or a squirrel deck, or maybe a combo deck of both. We'll see. Okay, and we got the Tender Wildguard, which is again another mana dork, a 2 mana 2/2, which can tap to add mana of any color. Can also tap to put a +1/+1 counter on it, which is pretty sweet to kind of just be able to pump it up. It's got Offspring of 2, so you can create a token copy of it. And I note Geared with these Offspring cards because being able to create more token copies of the tokens that are Offspring could be pretty nice. If you had say, well, let's say you had another one of these guys on 2, geared on 3, and then you played another one with Offspring, you could then create a tap the geared and your 2-drop to create 2 more copies of the Offspring right away, and that would just like ramp you quite a bit. So keep an eye on geared for the set for all the Offspring stuff. If there's anything that really good to Offspring with geared, then definitely some good potential. And then in the future, you can use the Tender Wild Guide itself to create more copies of other tokens that come into play, because it itself is not a token. So pretty sweet there. All right, we've got Shrike Forced, which is a 3-mana 1/3 flying double strike and vigilance. I thought this would be, I mean, this would be pretty cool if you pumped it up quite a bit. But in Soul Flare decks, it's got a lot of pretty good keywords that you would want. Flying and Double Strike and Vigilance are all keywords you really want. In Standard, we've got the Urborg Scavengers, which is kind of nice. So maybe there's an Urborg Scavenger deck that's pretty good. We'll see. I don't know. I like this card. But yeah, those are kind of the synergies I thought with that. And that is basically it for the previews we got today. Please let me know in the comments everything I missed. I'm sure I missed a bunch of cool combos or synergies. Let me know what you think about the set. Are you excited? How are you feeling about it? And thanks so much for watching. I'll probably be back tomorrow with all the previews that we get each day. So like, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more, and hope you have a wonderful day.